I walked into my new director's office thinking it would be a normal first one-on-one. I had my notebook, a clean pen, a list of projects I'd inherited after 2 rounds of layoffs. I even rehearsed the calm, professional version of myself in the elevator, the one that says alignment instead of problem. 19 minutes later, I was holding a termination packet, and the worst part was not the firing. It was the moment I realized he didn't know who I was. He never said my name, not once. He looked at the calendar invite like it had offended him, then looked right through me the way some people look through a waiter when they're already angry about the bill. "Hey," he said, not standing, phone face up on the desk. "Have a seat?" I waited. Most managers glance at your badge. Most people at least try. He didn't. I helped him. "Morning, I'm..." "Right," he cut in like my sentence was a speed bump. "So here's what we're going to do. I'm doing a reset." That word, reset. The corporate version of a guillotine. He flipped his laptop around to show a spreadsheet I couldn't read from where I sat. Rows and columns, colors, head count, job codes, like we were inventory. "I've reviewed the org," he said, "and I'm not convinced your function is essential at the scale we're operating." My function? Not my role, not my work, not my name. I swallowed the first reaction and kept my voice steady. I work in validation and traceability. In this industry, it's not optional. We're audited. He lifted his hand, polite, dismissive. "I'm aware, but we've got redundancy. People hiding behind compliance language. We're moving lean." He said it like he'd practiced saying it to a mirror. Then he slid one sheet of paper across the desk. Not a discussion doc, not a warning, not a performance plan, a form. Transition acknowledgement, signature line at the bottom. I glanced at the wall clock without meaning to. It had been 19 minutes since the meeting started. That's how quickly my career was being reduced to a pen stroke. I didn't touch the paper. I didn't reach for the pen. I asked the only question that matters in a regulated plant. Who is taking over my sign-off authority for releases and change controls? His eyes flickered, like he'd hit a question he didn't have an answer for. "That's operational," he said. "We'll handle coverage." "Coverage isn't a qualified person," I replied. "Auditors ask for named authority. If product goes out without proper sign-off, it's not a staffing issue. It's a compliance failure." He smiled, tight and annoyed. "We're not going to debate. This is a leadership decision." And for the first time, I felt the shape of what this was. It wasn't about my work being unnecessary. It was about my work being inconvenient. Because I was the person who could say no when someone wanted to speed things up. He glanced at his phone again like I was background noise. "Sign today," he said, "if you want the cleanest outcome." I looked at the paper. There were no severance numbers, no explanation, no reason code, just language that sounded harmless until you lived through it. I pushed it back toward him. "I'm not signing anything in a meeting I wasn't told was a termination," I said. "Send it to my personal email. Include HR. Include the reason." His smile vanished for a beat, then came back sharper. "Okay," he said slowly, like he'd been waiting for me to be difficult. "Then we do it the hard way." He stood, gathered his laptop, and walked to the door, as if the meeting ended because he decided and it did. At the threshold, he paused and said, "Make sure you return your badge by end of day." Then he left. I stayed seated for a second, staring at the empty chair he'd never offered me. 19 minutes. He never learned my name. And as the silence settled, my calendar refreshed. A new invite appeared that I definitely did not schedule. Quick sync. HR review location, the same room I was sitting in. Start time. In 1 hour. Attendees. Hidden. My stomach tightened, but not with fear. With certainty. Someone had planned this. Cleanly. Quietly. Ahead of time. Because you don't quick sync a termination without booking the room first. I stood, walked out into the hallway, and felt the building like I'd never felt it before. The hum of fluorescent lights, the soft ding of doors sealing, the faint chemical bite of disinfectant drifting from the gowning area. I wasn't angry yet. I was awake. And as I headed back to my desk, one thought landed so hard it felt like a warning bell. If they were firing the person who signs off on process changes, what change were they trying to make right after I was gone? I didn't go back to my desk and rage type a resignation email. I didn't call my wife. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't even tell my closest coworker. I did what I'd done for years in a regulated plant. Whenever something felt off, I assumed it was a process failure until I proved it wasn't. Because in my world, feelings don't protect you. Records do. The hallway outside his office smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and warm plastic. My badge lanyard kept tapping the zipper of my jacket with every step, a small, annoying sound that suddenly felt too loud. Back at my desk, my hands were steady, but my chest wasn't. The termination invite sat on my calendar like a bruise. Quick sync, HR review. Same room, 1 hour. Attendees hidden. That last part was what bothered me most. Hidden attendee lists weren't common here. We weren't a tech startup playing secrecy games. We were a medical device sterilization plant that lived under audits, documentation, and predictable procedure. If HR wanted a meeting, HR booked it. If a director wanted a meeting, his assistant booked it. There were patterns. This had none. So I opened my calendar and clicked into the room details. Juniper room. The room schedule link was visible if you knew where to look. Most people didn't. I did because I'd spent half my career chasing meeting minutes for change control reviews. I clicked room availability, then view schedule, and right there, 2 blocks back to back. First, my one-on-one. Organizer, the new director. Second, the HR review. Organizer, facilities admin. I stared at that for a full 5 seconds. Facilities admin was the generic account used when someone wanted to reserve a room without having their name on the invite. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't wrong. It was just convenient. Convenience is what people chase when they're trying to avoid accountability. I stood up and walked to facilities. Facilities was behind the shipping corridor, where the air always smelled like cardboard, tape adhesive, and that sharp industrial cleaner that burns your nose for a second. The office was small and cluttered, binders, spare key cards, a stack of out-of-order signs leaning against the wall. Marisol sat at her desk with 2 monitors and the expression of someone who had watched 1,000 minor disasters and learned not to be impressed by any of them. "Hey," I said carefully, keeping my tone normal. "Can you help me with something? I need Juniper Room's booking export for today, just the schedule." She didn't ask why. She just looked at me over her glasses like she already knew. "That room brings chaos," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "I'm starting to notice." She clicked into the booking system, the same one that controlled every conference room and door sign in the admin wing. Her fingers moved fast, no hesitation. Then she stopped. She said. My stomach tightened. "What?" She pointed at the screen without turning it toward me. "Your one-on-one? You didn't book it." "I know." She clicked again. "He booked it. Your new director." "I know," I repeated, and realized my voice sounded flatter than I meant it to. Marisol scrolled. "And the HR review? Booked under facilities admin. That's a choice." "Can you see who requested it?" I asked. She leaned in. "Request came through email, from an assistant account. Not HR, not you." "Can you export the attendee list?" I asked, and I kept my face calm, even though my pulse had started climbing. She paused, just a beat, not because she couldn't, but because she was deciding whether she wanted to be involved. Then she shrugged like she'd already chosen her side, weeks ago. "If the booking system has an attendee list attached, it can be exported," she said. "It's not secret, it's just not obvious." She clicked export. A file appeared. She dragged it into an email addressed to my work inbox, hesitated, then added my personal email in the CC field like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You didn't see me do that," she said, her voice low. "I didn't," I replied. As I turned to leave, she said something that made my skin go cold. Also, there's another meeting in Juniper today. After the HR one. It's booked by him again. I stopped. What's it called? Marisol read it off the screen. Process acceleration alignment. That phrase hit me like a door slamming shut. Process acceleration was what executives said when they wanted to change throughput without saying shortcuts. It was what they called it when they wanted to squeeze more units out of a sterilization cycle without doing the slow, expensive work that makes it defensible in an audit. Who's invited? I asked. Marisol's eyes flicked across the list. Him, a senior supervisor, someone from quality. Not you. Not me. The person they were firing. The person whose job was to say, you can't do that without validation. I walked back to my desk with the export file sitting in my inbox like a weight. When I opened it, it was worse than I expected. It wasn't just a room schedule. It was a timeline. It showed my one-on-one was created by him days earlier, before he'd ever spoken to me. It showed the HR review was booked under facilities admin, concealed, and it showed the process acceleration meeting was scheduled for the same afternoon, with the exact people needed to push an interim change through. Without the one person who would slow it down, it wasn't random, it was choreography. And as I sat there staring at the names, I felt my irritation turn into something sharper than anger, understanding. Because suddenly the firing wasn't personal at all. It was strategic. They weren't removing a salary. They were removing friction. And as my phone buzzed with a reminder, quick sync, HR review in 30 minutes, I realized that if I walked into that room like a stunned employee, I'd leave as a deleted one. So I did the only thing I could do without access, without power, without raising my voice. I forwarded the export to my personal email with one word in the subject line, keep. Then I opened a new note and started listing facts. What was scheduled, who was invited, who wasn't, what it implied. Because if they wanted to paint me as redundant, I needed something better than outrage. I needed a reason they couldn't dismiss. And I didn't know it yet, but the next meeting would answer a question I hadn't dared say out loud. If they were pushing me out this fast, what exactly were they about to change once I was gone? They didn't call it a termination meeting. They called it a quick sync. That's how you know it's designed to keep you quiet. If you walk in expecting a conversation, you're already behind. I got to Juniper Room 5 minutes early on purpose, not to be polite, because I wanted to see who arrived, in what order, and whether anyone avoided eye contact, like they already knew what was coming. The room looked the same as it always did. Cheap table, 2 chairs, whiteboard stained with old marker ghosts. The air felt slightly warmer than the hallway, like the vent was stuck on a cycle that never quite cooled. My badge lanyard tapped my zipper with every breath. That tiny sound became the metronome for how calm I needed to stay. HR arrived first. It wasn't the HR director. It was the business partner assigned to our manufacturing wing, a woman named Celeste, who had perfected the art of sounding sympathetic while saying things that ruin lives. She carried a folder that was too thick for a quick sync. The new director arrived second. No folder, no notebook. Just his phone and the kind of confidence that comes from being sure the decision is already made. He sat down without looking at me, like I was an appointment, not a person. Celeste smiled professionally. Thank you for meeting with us. Then she slid the folder across the table toward me. Termination letter, separation agreement, return to property checklist, benefits notice, all ready, all printed, all prepared. Meaning, whatever happened in my one-on-one was never a discussion. It was step 1. Celeste's tone stayed soft. This is a business-driven decision. We are eliminating your position due to organizational restructuring. There it was again, the clean, bloodless words that make everything sound reasonable. I didn't reach for the pen. I didn't even open the packet at first. I asked a question that no one likes because it forces them to be specific. Which responsibilities are being reassigned and to whom? The director exhaled through his nose like I'd asked him to do math. "We're centralizing quality and compliance," he said. "Your piece rolls up into a larger function." "That's not a person," I replied. "This facility is audited. Auditors ask for named sign-off authority, for release and change control. Who is it now?" Celeste's smile tightened. "We have a transition plan." "Is the plan documented?" I asked. The director leaned forward slightly, and for the first time he looked at me like I was inconvenient. "We're not here to debate operational details." I opened the folder then, slowly, and scanned the paperwork. No performance issues, no PIP, no warnings, no prior discussion. Reason code, role redundancy, and then I noticed something on the return of property checklist that made my stomach drop in a quiet, heavy way. It listed my laptop, badge, safety glasses, phone, normal, but it also listed validation binder. My validation binder wasn't some company-issued handbook. It was my working compilation, printed protocols, a personally indexed map of where the validated documents lived, what cycle parameters were locked, what had open change controls, what audit questions had been asked before, and how we answered them. It wasn't secret, but it was context. They weren't just taking equipment. They were trying to take my map. Because a person without context is easier to silence. That's when the quick sync became something else in my head. Containment. I kept my voice level. "Why is my binder on the property list?" Celeste didn't blink. "Any work-related materials remain company property." "It's mostly printed procedures that already exist in the system," I said. "The index is my notes." The director cut in. "It stays here." He still hadn't said my name. Celeste placed her hand lightly on the separation agreement, like she was calming an animal. "If you sign today, you receive the enhanced package. If you don't, we proceed with standard separation." "What changes if I don't sign?" I asked. Celeste's tone stayed pleasant. "If you don't sign, your access ends immediately. Your severance is reduced, and you'll have less time to transition." There it was. The pressure wasn't about paperwork. It was about speed. They wanted my access gone before I could raise any compliance concern about whatever process acceleration meeting they were holding this afternoon. The director's phone buzzed. He glanced down and nodded like he was tracking a schedule. I looked at the clock. 19 minutes had been enough for him to decide I didn't matter. Now they wanted me gone in minutes more. I chose my words carefully because this is where people make mistakes that are used against them later. "I'm not refusing to cooperate," I said. "I'm refusing to sign a legal agreement under surprise pressure. And I'm asking for written designation of who assumes my qualified sign-off responsibilities." Celeste's smile hardened. "We do not provide internal assignment documentation as part of separation. You can deny it in writing," I said calmly, "but I'm going to request it." The director finally spoke with impatience sharp enough to cut. "This is over. You're not a fit for the future state." I looked directly at him. "What is my name?" I asked. He paused. Not long, but long enough to confirm what I already knew. His eyes flicked, searching. Then he snapped, "It doesn't matter." And that one sentence did something inside me. Not heartbreak, not humiliation. A clean break. Because it told me he wasn't firing a human being. He was removing a constraint. Celeste stood. "Security will escort you to collect your belongings. Please return your badge." The director was already packing his laptop like the room belonged to him now. Security arrived. Polite, uncomfortable, doing a job they probably hated. I walked out with my head up, holding my notebook like it was the only thing I was allowed to keep of myself. In the hallway, the clean room doors sealed behind me with a soft ding. In the lobby, the air smelled like winter and floor polish. I felt the cold through the glass. Outside, in the parking lot, I sat in my car and stared at my hands on the steering wheel. My access was gone. My badge was gone. My job was gone. But I wasn't panicking, because I finally understood the real situation. They didn't fire me because I was redundant. They fired me because I was in the way of a change they didn't want validated. and I had one thing they couldn't delete from the system fast enough: the Juniper Room export, the schedule, the attendee list, the timing. Proof that my quick sync wasn't a conversation. It was a step in a plan. I drove to the nearest gas station off the highway because I needed somewhere bright and anonymous, where I could think without being watched. The coffee smelled burnt. The fluorescent lights buzzed. A man in a work jacket scratched lottery tickets at the counter. I bought a cup I didn't want, sat by the window, and opened my laptop at home through my personal hotspot. Then I started mapping names. Director, HR, quality attendee, senior supervisor. And as I traced the connections, something else came into focus, something I hadn't expected. The quality person on the process acceleration invite wasn't a yes man. It was someone I knew, someone who'd been quietly sidelined for months because they asked too many questions. And that's when I realized I wasn't completely alone. Because if that person was in the room later today, then the plan might have a witness who still had access. And I didn't know it yet. But that decision, who they chose to invite and who they chose to exclude, was about to cost them far more than a severance package. I didn't go home and write a "one day you'll regret this" post. I wrote an email, not a dramatic one, not a threatening one. The kind of email people hate because it leaves no room for interpretation later. Subject: request for written designation of interim release authority. 2. Celeste in HR, the quality director, the compliance mailbox, CC, my personal email, 3 bullets, nothing else. 1. The reason code for separation in writing. 2. The name and qualification record of whoever was now signing off sterilization releases and change controls. 3. Confirmation that no cycle parameter changes would be implemented without approved change control and validation. I hit send, set my laptop down, and stared at my kitchen sink for a long time like it might offer guidance. The apartment smelled like dish soap and microwaved pasta. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked at nothing. I kept thinking about the phrase process acceleration alignment. That wasn't a meeting title. It was a confession. An hour later, my phone rang from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Celeste's voice came through, clipped and bright. "Please call me back as soon as possible." I didn't call back. I opened my email again and saw the first response had already landed. Not from HR, but from compliance. Not an answer. A calendar invite. Urgent clarification. Sterilization throughput change control. Time: tomorrow morning, attendees. Compliance lead. Quality director, HR. The new director. Location: virtual. My chest tightened in a way that wasn't fear. It was the feeling of a door finally opening, because compliance didn't schedule urgent clarification meetings unless someone had stepped on a landmine. And I knew exactly where the landmine was buried. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the Juniper Room export, the hidden booking, the way the director's eyes flicked when I asked who would take over sign-off authority. At 2 a.m, I got up, made a mug of tea I didn't drink, and organized my files the way I used to before audits. Timeline first, document second, interpretation never, just facts. In the morning, I joined the meeting from my kitchen table. Camera on, shirt pressed, notes open. The compliance lead started with a simple sentence that immediately tightened the room. "Before we discuss any throughput changes, we need to confirm qualified authority for sterilization release and change control." The director's face appeared in his square. He looked annoyed already, like the meeting had inconvenienced him. HR was there, posture rigid. The quality director looked tired, not surprised. The director spoke first, fast. "We have coverage. This is being handled." Compliance didn't react emotionally. Compliance doesn't do emotions. "Who is the qualified authority?" The lead asked again. "Name and training record." The director blinked, then said a junior engineer's name. A competent person, sure, but not qualified yet for what my role covered. Not without documented training, not without sign-off, not without time. The quality director leaned in. Do we have that training record completed? HR cut in. We can expedite the transition. Compliance replied, calm as glass. Expedite is not a training record. Silence. It lasted long enough that I could hear my refrigerator hum. Then the compliance lead said, second issue. A throughput change draft was created yesterday morning. We need to confirm whether any cycle parameter adjustments were discussed or planned outside the change control process. The director's jaw tightened. That's not related to any separation. We're optimizing operations. The quality director said, the timing is what makes it related. The director looked toward HR as if HR should fix this for him. HR didn't. Compliance asked, why was the termination meeting scheduled in Juniper Room, under a facilities admin organizer, rather than HR? That question hit like a slap because it meant someone had already looked. Someone had already requested the booking history. My pulse jumped and I forced my shoulders down. HR answered too quickly. That must have been an administrative error. Compliance didn't argue. They documented. We will require the room booking history and attendee export for those meetings, the lead said. Facilities can provide it. In that moment, the director's confidence shifted into something uglier. Not rage, calculations. He realized his own attempt at secrecy had created a paper trail. I spoke once, and only once. I'm not asking for my job back, I said. I'm asking that no sterilization parameter changes be implemented without validation and qualified release authority. The compliance lead nodded. The quality director nodded. HR looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. The director stared at me for a beat, then said, "You're creating disruption." That sentence told me he was already building a story where I was the problem. The meeting ended with action items and a promise that compliance would pause any throughput adjustments until authority and training records were confirmed. It wasn't a win that felt good. It was a win that felt heavy. Because the second you trigger compliance in a regulated environment, you become the person everyone blames for the slowdown, even if the slowdown is what keeps them safe. 2 hours later, Celeste emailed me again. Subject: revised separation package. They increased severance, added an extended benefits period, included a confidentiality clause with language that felt tighter than before. It wasn't generosity. It was a purchase. They wanted my signature more than they wanted my silence, and they were willing to pay extra to combine both. I read the package twice, then replied with one sentence. Please include written confirmation, copied to compliance, that all throughput-related cycle changes are paused until validation is completed and qualified authority is formally designated. I didn't mention Juniper Room. I didn't mention the booking export. I didn't gloat. I stayed inside the rules, and for about half a day, it worked. Then the smear started. A former coworker texted me that evening. They're saying you were difficult, that you resisted change, that you tried to slow production. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. My first impulse was to defend myself to everyone, to send receipts, to call people. But that would have been messy, emotional, easy to dismiss. So I did something colder and much safer. I wrote down every person I trusted and every person I didn't. Then I wrote down the only thing that mattered. Who could testify to process, not personality? That's when Marisol texted again. One more thing, she wrote. Door sign template for Juniper that day. They didn't put your name? A minute later, she sent a photo. It was the standard door sign format. Room, time, meeting title, organizer, and under attendee, instead of my name, it said employee. Transition. I felt my throat tighten, but it wasn't embarrassment. It was confirmation. They hadn't just failed to learn my name. They had intentionally removed it. They wanted me to be a placeholder, not a person, because placeholders don't get sympathy, and they don't raise questions. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, with the photo open on my phone and the revised package open on my laptop. This was the messy part people don't tell you about. You can be right and still lose friends. You can be right and still get labeled. You can be right and still watch your reputation wobble because one director with confidence can poison a hallway in a day. I had a moral choice, and it wasn't heroic, it was practical. I could go scorched earth, send the door sign to half the company, let rumors fight rumors. Or I could stay clean, protect my future, and let the documentation do the damage quietly. I chose clean. I replied to Celeste the next morning with a simple condition. I would sign separation terms after compliance confirmed. In writing, that validation controls were being followed, and authority was properly assigned. No threats, no speeches. And then I did the part that cost me the most. I updated my resume, not with bitterness, with precision. Industry keywords, audit readiness, change control, traceability. I started applying. Because even if I won this fight, I wasn't going back to work under someone who couldn't be bothered to learn my name. 3 days later, another invite hit my inbox. Not from HR, not from compliance, from an unfamiliar name with an external email domain. Subject, fact-finding call, change control review. My stomach went tight again, but this time it was different. Because external fact-finding meant the issue had moved beyond internal discomfort. It meant someone above the director had decided this needed to be defensible, and the next conversation was going to decide whether my story stayed a rumor or became a file. The fact-finding call didn't come with drama. No shouting, no threats, no, we're going to ruin you. Just a calm invitation that told me the company had crossed a line and now needed a clean way back. The email signature said she was an external auditor liaison, contracted support that regulated manufacturers hire when they need someone credible to pull threads without internal politics getting in the way. That mattered because external people don't care who has the nicest smile in leadership meetings. They care what can be defended on paper. I joined the call from the same spot at my kitchen table where I'd been reading severance packages like they were foreign language. She started with one sentence that set the tone. I'm going to ask you for facts, not feelings. Perfect, I said, and meant it. She asked me to walk through the timeline in order: the one-on-one, the termination meeting, the throughput change draft, and the room booking details. I kept my voice even and my answers small. When she asked about motive, I didn't speculate. I don't know why he did it, I said. I know what was scheduled, what was requested, and what authority was being removed. Then she asked for supporting records. I sent them. The Juniper Room export from facilities. My email requesting written designation of interim authority. Compliance's meeting, invite, and pause language. The photo of the door sign that said, employee. Transition instead of my name. No screenshots of gossip. No coworker texts. Nothing that would turn it into a personality war. When I hit send, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "This is helpful." That phrase didn't sound like praise, it sounded like weight, because helpful in her world means this will stand up if we have to show it. Before we ended, she asked one question I hadn't expected. If offered reinstatement, would you return? I didn't answer immediately because it was the kind of question that reveals your priorities. I could have said yes, out of ego, out of spite, out of the fantasy of walking back in and watching people scramble. But that wouldn't be real. No, I said finally. Not under that leadership chain. I'm not trying to win a chair back. I'm trying to make sure shortcuts don't get passed off as optimization. She thanked me and ended the call without ceremony. I sat there for a while afterward, listening to my refrigerator hum, staring at the spot on the table where my badge used to land every evening. Then my phone buzzed. An email from HR. Subject, Final Separation Agreement, updated. This time, the agreement included exactly what I had asked for, in writing, with compliance copied on the chain. Confirmation that throughput-related sterilization cycle changes were paused pending validation. Written designation of interim sign-off authority with a training completion plan. A statement that my separation reason code remained role redundancy, but with an added note acknowledging the timing, was not intended to impact change control compliance. That last line was corporate language for, we know how it looks, and we want it to look better. The severance was higher than before. Benefits extended, a neutral reference clause, a non-disparagement clause that went both ways. They weren't being kind. They were closing a file. I read it twice, then once more, slowly. I forwarded it to my personal email. Then I signed. And even as I signed, I felt no joy, just calm. Because the signature wasn't surrender. It was containment, my containment, on my terms. 2 days later, the company sent a bland organizational update email to the entire plant. It said the director was leaving to pursue other opportunities. No mention of compliance, no mention of my termination, no mention of anything that would trigger questions. But there was one line buried in the middle that mattered more than his exit paragraph. Sterilization throughput initiatives will remain paused pending completion of full validation review. I read that line 3 times. That was my satisfaction. Not applause. Not revenge theater. A pause that prevented a shortcut from becoming a finding. A pause that forced them to do it correctly because now someone external had eyes on it. A week after that, Marisol texted me one last time. You didn't get treated right, she wrote, but at least they can't pretend they didn't plan it. I stared at her message and felt something unexpectedly soft in my chest. Not gratitude exactly. More like relief that someone inside the building had seen me as a person, even when leadership didn't. Then life moved forward, the way it always does when you're not watching for drama. I interviewed at another manufacturer across town. Similar clean rooms. Similar ding of sealed doors. Same faint bite of disinfectant in the air. On my first day, the new manager met me at reception, shook my hand, and said my name clearly, first and last, like it was the simplest sign of respect in the world. I drove home that evening in silence, and for the first time since the termination meeting, I felt truly calm. Because here's what I learned in those 19 minutes and everything that followed. When someone can't be bothered to learn your name, they're telling you how they see people. Not as humans, as obstacles, as cells in a spreadsheet. And the cleanest kind of revenge isn't burning anything down. It's making sure the rules they tried to dodge become the rules that end them. Not with shouting, with documents, with dates, with a room booking export that never forgets who planned what and when. That night, I opened a drawer in my kitchen and put one thing inside, a printed copy of the compliance confirmation email, folded neatly, not because I wanted to live in the past, because I wanted a reminder. If anyone ever tries to erase me again, I won't waste time asking them to respect me. I'll make them prove they did the right thing. And if they can't, then they're the ones who get removed.